This happened quite some years ago, when I was around 15. Have you ever experienced this in the past, when walking by an abandoned building, getting that overwhelming urge to explore? This is what happened to me. My friend told me there was an absurd abandoned building which was not so far away from where I lived. I didn't know what he meant by absurd, but I remember being as excited as, well, a schoolboy. My friend told me about this place the day before the start of summer vacation. We were both excited and eager to check the place out, so we ended up visiting the abandoned building straight after school, with some kids that we weren't even that friendly with. It took a long time for the kids to all gather outside of the school. When all 8 of us had actually arrived, the sun was beginning to go down. We followed my friend who knew the way like a row of ants. When we actually got there, I remember feeling very disappointed. I was expecting a house with the roof rotting away, the windows smashed, the kind of house that screamed, "I'm haunted." In reality, the abandoned building was quite clean. The only strange thing about it was the location, as it was slightly out of town in the countryside. All of the other kids seemed to be disappointed too, but having come all this way, we decided to explore the place all the same. After some discussion, we cautiously entered through the back door. Looking inside, there were strange things lying all around the place. Beakers, cylinders, microscopes. They were the kind of things you expect to find in the science room at a school. We figured there was no way this was a normal house. But what grabbed my attention the most wasn't the strange instruments lying all around the place, but the massive bookshelf, stuffed from end to end. There were also a few books lying in a pile in front of the shelf. It was obvious that someone had recently messed around with some of these books. We soon found out who the culprit was. It was the friend who had told us about the building in the first place. He asked us all a question.
Do you know why I said this place was absurd?
He pointed towards a specific book and told us to open it. We did, and gasped, horrified. The book was filled with pictures of dead men and women, some with their skin peeled off. Even the friend who had seen the book before became silent and looked uncomfortable. But at that moment, I realized something. Isn't this just the house of a doctor? Although still slightly scared, there was a murmur of agreement from the group, and as it so often does, logic and reasoning helped relieve some of the tension built up from the fear of the unknown. While the rest of the group looked through other books in the bookshelf, I decided to explore some of the other rooms in the house. The kitchen, living room, bathroom, toilet. After looking through the whole of the first floor, I realized that the person who was living here must have been extremely well educated. It was the style of the house. Even being just 15 years of age, I knew that the furniture was of very good quality. The interior of the house was designed so efficiently, and everything was beautifully packed in, utilizing all of the space available perfectly. Considering all of this, the person who lived here must have been a hard-working doctor or medicine student. I overheard one of the guys saying that a mad scientist must live here. I remember being annoyed at that, and thinking he was a moron. The group quickly became bored of looking through the books, and since it was getting late, we all decided to end the exploration for that day. However, as we continued to explore the first floor, we realized something strange. Even after thoroughly exploring, we found no stairs going to the second floor, but it was obvious when looking at the house from the outside that there was indeed a second floor. Using our small brains, we figured that there would be a flight of stairs outside of the building, but there wasn't. One of our friends found the remnants of perhaps a stairway. If there had been stairs there, they'd definitely been taken down. One of us suggested that perhaps there was something hidden on the second floor. We all made fantastical suggestions as to what could be up there. This immediately sent us into an excited frenzy, and all thoughts of going home vanished from our minds. There was a widespread consent. We just had to see the second floor. We figured that entering through the outside would be easier. We looked around the building, and found some pipes that would be easy to climb. To see if it was safe, the best tree climber of the group went to test out the route. That was me. It was easy to climb, but something came to my attention which alarmed me. You couldn't see anything through the upstairs windows. They'd been covered up by newspapers and marker pens, so that barely any light could shine through. As everybody climbed onto the roof of the house, I told them about the closed-off windows, and this seemed to frighten some of them. A few of them decided to go back home. Those were the smart ones. Those of us who stayed behind took a vote on whether we should enter the second floor. In the end, curiosity won. As I led the way to the window, I was half happy, half in deep regret of the decision. There was no choice now, though. I had talked the big talk about checking it out, and I didn't want to look like a coward by backing out now. I summoned all of the courage I had available, and I swung open the window. I gasped. Right in front of me was a woman in a swimsuit, with a large grin plastered on her face. I screamed and thought my heart was going to stop, but then my friend began to laugh at me and patted me on the shoulder. It was just a poster. Everybody laughed. I remember feeling so relieved I couldn't even be bothered to get angry. I looked at the poster again as I tried to enter, and something caught my attention. There was lipstick on the poster where the woman's lips were. Although I thought that was strange, I entered the house, and the guys followed me in. I found myself in an understandably dark and damp passageway. Up until that point, I had thought the individual who lived here was intelligent and had good taste. As we moved further in, the abnormality of the previous resident became more and more apparent. Along the passage were pictures of girls in bikinis, and other infatuating costumes. Just this would have been okay, but the faces of the woman had been carved out and replaced with the faces of dead women, obviously taken from one of the books we had found on the first floor. Any positive thoughts I had in my mind vanished. It didn't matter if this was the previous resident who had done this, or a homeless person who had moved in. I looked at the faces of my friends around me. The consensus was, let's get the fuck out of here. As we set to return to the window we used to enter, my friend spoke up in a wavering voice.
There's someone there.
We pointed a flashlight in the direction he was pointing at. There was a door made out of glass at the end of the hallway, and as we all flashed our lights on the door, it became clear that there was a woman wearing nothing but her underwear, staring at us intently. In fact, as we stared, it became clear there were more people behind her, all facing our direction. We just stood there, pointing our lights towards them. We were scared shitless, expecting the woman to rush us. But as we stood there, we noticed that they weren't moving. We ventured towards the door, and as we got closer to it, it became apparent. The room was filled with female mannequins. There must have been 15 or 20 of the things, a miniature forest of mannequins. Someone whispered something about how creepy it all was. Everybody was thinking the same thing. The underwear the mannequins were wearing wasn't the functional type that women would normally wear. Even a school kid like me knew this. They were the type designed to infatuate men. It was like we had a glance into the mind of the person who had been living here. Someone shouted, as if to try and relieve the tension.
My god, the guy who was living here must have been a massive perv.
Everybody laughed. I felt a bit more calm and light-hearted after that. We decided to explore the place a bit more before going home. Looking around the room, there was also a broken TV, toys, a CD player, and a pile of magazines lying around. I opened one of the magazines, and sure enough, all of the women's faces in the magazine had been replaced with those of dead bodies. This in itself made me feel sick, but something caught my attention that made me feel even worse. The magazine was from this month. I went to go and show the others. As we all realized the predicament we were in, we heard something. A faint sound of something moving. Terrified, we all looked around the room in search of what could have caused that noise. We could see all the way to the end of the room. I could see all the books, furniture, and mannequins surrounding the room. That was when I noticed something else. In between the mannequins was a face. I saw a widespread grin, an expression of absolute maleficent glee. "You like these things?" It was a man's voice, but whoever he was, I could just about make out that he was wearing a dress. Someone let out a scream. We all started to panic and ran straight towards the exit. I was the last one out. As I jumped through the window and onto the roof, I heard him speak again. "You like..." When I heard that voice, I felt goosebumps rage all over my body. All I remember after that was jumping off of the roof and bolting for the hills. The kid who lived closest told his parents the events of that night, and the next day, the police went to investigate the building. By the time the police arrived, the building was empty. They checked again the following day, but the house was completely lifeless. The man in the house was never found, and the house itself has since been demolished. I once visited the place when I was older, but there was nothing left to see. It was as if all of us had imagined the incident of that night. Even now, when I see an abandoned building, I get the creeps.
I live in a not so large and not so friendly block of apartments. Well, it's really more of a converted old Victorian house, which is now modified into 5 small apartments per block. The main door is really crappy and still hasn't been replaced, even though the entire building has been refurbished. This is the case despite the landlord promising it would be done by the new year. Anyway, this door doesn't lock when you close it. It has to be locked manually, either by the key from the outside or by the twisty lock on the inside. Unfortunately, people who live around me can be, well, let's say rude, and that's putting it kindly. They're always blasting music until late, setting off the fire alarm, which is linked in every apartment and is super loud and annoying. But most annoyingly, always, and I mean always, people are leaving the main door unlocked. This was something more than an annoyance, up until very recently, when something truly horrific happened to me. It was a Thursday night, and as usual, I was getting ready for bed at around 11 p.m. And as usual, despite it being a weekday, one of the surrounding apartments is having a party. Again, it's the weekday, and this was annoying because who throws a party on a Thursday? I mean, just wait for Friday. Not only that though, it's supposed to be a lockdown, so while other people can't see their own families, me included, you get to keep everyone up. The music was noticeable, but not super loud from the comfort of my bedroom, thankfully. So I do what I always do when I go to bed. I put on some scary stories. I chill, and I try to go to sleep. So I finally managed to drift off at around 12 o'clock, and I'm awakened for the first time at around 2 because of the music. So I get up and I go to the bathroom as I thought I might as well since I'm already up. So being annoyed and frustrated, I get back into bed and continue to enjoy my stories until I'm asleep. I'm suddenly awoken by loud stumps coming up the stairs. I live at the very top of the building, so the final staircase only leads to my door. Now I'm more than exhausted, more exhausted than angry. So I just lie there, awake, until I hear something that jolts my half-asleep brain fully awake. My door being pushed open. Someone is actually trying to push open my door and enter my apartment without my permission. Not hard or forcefully, mind you. Not like they were trying to break it, but they definitely were trying to gain entry. Now this may be because my mind was still foggy, or that I was still so tired that I didn't care, but I just stupidly assumed that someone in a drunken stupor was trying to get into the wrong place. Maybe the party was at a different top floor apartment, I thought. So I ignored it. Even when it happened again, I could hear scratching and mumbling on the other side. Stupid, I know, but I really just wanted to go to sleep. So the next morning, I woke up as normal and got ready for work as I opened my door to leave. And what do I see? 2 men asleep on the floor, blocking my way, and one of them bleeding from his head. Now, I'm not judgmental, or at least I try not to be, but these men were clearly homeless. I mean, the smell alone told me that. It was like having a ball of dirt slapped in your face. Not ideal for an early morning start. When I eventually got one of them to get up, the other failed to do so. He was clearly on drugs. It was completely out of it. Thankfully for me, the man was okay. I mean, I could have been rushed or anything, but he explained to me that he had been attacked and chased, so they took shelter here. So I offered to call the ambulance, which the men eventually accepted through a one-sided conversation of murmurs and groans. So I stepped out to get a better look at the man on the ground. As I did so, the other man stepped inside of my apartment. I just stared at him with our eyes locking. He reached in his pocket and I postured up ready to fight. He looked at the other man and he just shook his head as if he were saying no. And thankfully he just came back out without incident, and I locked my door. The ambulance eventually came. I informed my landlord of this, and he said that he would warn the other people living there that they must keep the door locked. But of course, every morning I go to work, the door is wide open with no consequence. But the real kicker is, because that guy was bleeding and was homeless, I didn't want to clean it myself and had to get professional cleaners to do so. And when I asked for my landlord to chip in, he just ignored me for days. And when he eventually got back to me, he said it's not that big of a deal. So I ended up paying for the whole thing myself, because I just didn't feel comfortable with that being around me. Now, I don't believe those men had intentions to hurt me. But what if I didn't lock my door? What if they had gotten in? When people are desperate and opportunities present themselves, you really don't know what people would do. 2 of them and 1 of me, asleep and alone, pretty scary when you think about it, right?